the biggest issue that, in my view, makes the two-state solution completely unrealistic has been, the expansion, of settlements, most of which, have taken place, largely over past 20 since, the Oslo Agreement. So it's, it seems like, well, Israel seems, on the surface, they want to make peace, they want to, go to the table and have dialogue. It seems like at the same time they're working as they can to sort of create facts on the ground, in the West. You know what I mean? Like when people say, for example, oh, it's so, unproductive. The Palestinians went to the UN and, they got observer status. These quote-unquote unilateral actions are so unproductive. I mean, creating settlements in the West Bank, I mean, that's a pretty unilateral action on the part of the Israeli government that's been ongoing, for quite some time now. And I must add, has accelerated, exponentially the Oslo Agreement, which is, it's very suspect. To me, an outside observer, it's extremely suspect, how much they really want peace. When they're, as I said, putting facts on the ground, as fast as they possibly can. What do you think? What are your thoughts about that?
By the same thread, during peace, even during the Oslo Accords in Camp David, there was no freezing of settlements. The only time that there has been a recent freezing of settlements, which means no building, no continuance, was been under Netanyahu, surprisingly.
I apologize if anybody's offended, but I'm going...
I'm sorry, you were saying?
Oh, you're cutting.
I'm cutting
I was just saying, I apologize, to everybody. I'm going to smoke. I hope nobody gets offended.
Not offended.
No, and I'm cutting it.
Okay.
I'm cutting it. I can hear you now, though. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, there are multiple ways of looking at what you would call settlements. I agree it is in deference to, or makes a future Palestinian state more complicated. That shouldn't be a rush to avoid a peace agreement. If anything, it should be a sign for Palestinians that they would want to rush a peace agreement as opposed to be opposed to it with the Israelis. And like I was saying, surprisingly enough, Netanyahu has been the only prime minister to have ever freeze settlement activity in hopes of restarting peace negotiations, and that just didn't happen. So one could argue that's what causes the lack of peace negotiations, but when there's settlements being frozen, no one's still negotiating peace. So there's really no clear indicator of what makes a peace agreement move forward. I also don't say there is a Palestinian...
Yeah, come on, let's be real.
Say there is a Palestinian state within the entire, let's hypothetically say the Palestinians get the entirety of everything across the Green Line, correct? Would any of these settlements really pose a demographic threat to a future Palestinian state? And if you look at the numbers, the answer is clearly no. Just as there are Arabs living within Israel society, why would be Jews living within Palestinian society? I think that's an indicator of normalization when you have multiple citizens of different backgrounds on both sides. I think a hostile future Palestinian state would be one where Jews were not welcome.
Yes.
So there is a large number.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fair question.
So I don't think it's going to be imposing. If there is a peace agreement, I think that just as I think Arabs living in Israel, Jews living within what would become the Palestinian state would have the option to choose whether or not they want to live within Palestine or whether they want to come back to Israel proper. Just as Arabs would have the choice, hey, there's a Palestinian state now, you have the choice. Would you rather hold your Israeli citizenship or move across the border? So I don't see how settlement activity is necessarily a building block to activity. Because there was settlement activity in Gaza, of course. There was a large number of settlers within even Sinai, within Gaza. I've seen where the Israeli buildings were in was Sinai. Now they peak on parts of cities. If anything, it's free. It's free development that you didn't have to build or pay for. So if people honestly want to say that the settlements are obstruction to, they haven't looked at history of Israeli settlements and what they mean when their peace agreements are met.
Okay, let me respond. There's a few things I want to respond to there. First of all, you make a good point, like, in terms of the Jewish populations possibly integrating with Palestinian society in the West Bank. I think, there's quite a few problems with that. I mean, the first issue with that is, it's a lot of ideological settlements. I mean, not all of them are ideological. I recognize that a lot of Israelis moved to the occupied territories, for economic reasons, because housing is highly subsidized there. That's a big reason. But a lot of them are, really ideological, and the possibility bulk of the settlement that are highly ideological, and the idea of integrating with the Palestinian state is, extremely unrealistic from the perspective of the people living in those settlements. I think there's also another issue. A lot of these settlements, like a lot of the farm territory, for example, let's be honest here, a lot of Palestinians have been kicked off their land in the West Bank for in order to build settlements, in order for the settlements to have agricultural lands. Israeli military doesn't pieces, all over the West Bank protecting the settlements for no reason. I mean, there's a lot of, conflict there. I think,
but we're discussing this from a ideological situation in which
you're making a comparison with Palestinians who are, more integrated in Israeli society.
It's possible. It's possible. If we can, I mean, in '48, it was thought to be impossible to integrate Arabs within Israeli society, but it happened. In a future, we're talking about a hypothetical situation where Palestine is completely sovereign, and I believe it is possible, and I think it will be a hallmark of that future state if they are capable of handling the situation. If they can handle a Jewish population and show the world that they are. Not that they need to prove anything, but I think it will be a hallmark of any future state in which that we have both populations on both sides of the border. And hopefully, if that's the case, maybe in the future it can prove that we can have a one-state solution. And maybe we look at it as maybe a catalyst or a stepping stone.
Yeah, I just don't know. I just see that, the situation, as right now. I mean, you go to any Palestinian village on a Friday.
I'm listening.
Where they have, popular demonstrations and, clashes with the military and settlement. Situation there is, pretty extreme, and all many of the price tag. Like you're saying, even if, they were to withdraw from the settlements, well, we know, if they withdraw from the settlements, they're going to demolish those neighborhoods. The settlements, and they demolished them. They just moved, the settlements to new settlements in the West Bank from Gaza, and say, they occupied from Gaza, and look what happened. Mind you, you forget to mention, the siege in 2006, where, there's been, a siege on Gaza. Exports have been cut off. Like, their factory output is down 95% since 2005 because they're cut off from exporting, to their major export markets. But back to the issue at hand, digressing back to the issue at hand, I mean, it's not like Israel is going to leave those, neighborhoods intact and say, hey, Palestinians in. Like, they don't operate in that sort of way. And to say that the settlement, I mean, like the settlements, yeah, okay, if they're just moving, Jews into areas, and farmland where they're completely.
But the settlements will only, in a future Palestinian state, will only serve to balance the type of government. if you withdraw every single Jew from the West Bank, as Abbas would like to do, it would systematically lead to radicalization. I don't think there's any question about that. That there would not be a tolerant state of Jews if there's no Jews in it. And the Jews who ideologically want to live there because they believe it's the Holy Land. To them, I don't think, for the most part, there's many of them who have stated time and time again, we just want to be here. We don't care. They don't. Some of the settlers hate Israel more than they hate the Palestinians. To be completely frank.
Yeah, but they hate Israel. They hate Israel because of the minimal tolerance Israel does have for the Arabs. They hate Israel because Israel's not ethnically cleansing the entire West Bank and Israel of non-Jews. Like, that's why they hate the Israeli state, because it's not extreme enough for them.
Let's not prop up an extreme.
No, I'm saying the ones that hate Israeli state, like the settlers, the ideological settlers.
But let's not prop up a minority that we know to be a minority. A majority of Israeli society, as you've already discussed before and recognized.
I'm not saying they're a minority, although if we were to just talk about the settlers in the West Bank, and you're the one who talked about the.
They will have
you're talking about the settlers that hate Israel.
There is a number of them, but it's small. But I'm saying is they will have a choice. I mean, if living in Judea and Shomron is as important to them as they say it is, then it should matter to them under whose jurisdiction it is. And I do expressively believe that a future Palestinian state without Jews is going to be a radical, intolerant one.
No, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I agree with everything you're saying. I'm just saying the next logical step.
Just as I
one state solution.
Just as the same.
Instead of having Jews and Palestinians under Palestinian authority in the West Bank, that's why that's why the settlements and the facts on the ground.
It's basically
logically created the context for the one-state solution, and that's why you're right. In the last decade, the one-state solution has really become a need for a one-state solution, and talking about Jews being able to stay in their settlements and.
Well, any settlements in a future Palestinian state are really just going to become free infrastructure. Roads, settlements, basically, we're discussing free infrastructure. Just as what happened in Gaza. Israel didn't just... There was lots of infrastructure left in Gaza that a large majority of it was destroyed because it had Zionist hands on it.
They destroyed all the homes.
I don't understand why it doesn't make sense to me. Here's all these free...
No, Israel demolished Israel demolished them.
A portion, but for the most part...
It doesn't make sense to me. Gazans could have moved into those homes, but...
There was a large number of homes that were left, and they were destroyed as well. But let's go ahead and move forward. I think we've already discussed pretty thoroughly the fact of are settlements an obstacle to peace?
No, but I'm just saying... I'm just saying, if we look at the Gaza context, every single house that settlers lived in Gaza were demolished by the Israeli government.
But that's not It's completely
all the infrastructure.
I have plenty of friends who live in Gush Katif, and it was not a massive demolition of everything that was left there. There was lots of infrastructure that was left behind.
Like what?
Lots of homes. There's factories. There's a blooming. Forgetting the ironic word using. There was a large flower industry that was left behind. There was infrastructure that was left behind. I'm not arguing the fact that there wasn't demolition. Some people were bitter about it, didn't want their homes to go to people, and did demolish. But it was not. We gotta discuss. It was not an Israeli governmental policy to destroy everything as they left. The same as when I said when I was in Sinai, there was plenty of Israeli structures that were still left in place.
Here's an article from Harad. on the issue from 2005. You want me to read?
If you could just post a link, I can read through it.
How, the demolishing, how the planned demolition of all of the settlement houses is going to start to take place. Would you like me to read the article from Haaretz?
You could just copy a link for me.
That says they're planning to destroy every settlement. All of them. All settlements in Gaza, all homes were demolished. And that was the policy of the government. Here, I won't read it out loud. I'll send you the article here, and you can read and you can read it later, or you can read it now.
Yeah, I can read it
choose.
now. I'm going to try another test, but forgive me, I'm just a man.
The evacuation of the Gaza Strip is going forward faster than anticipated, such that all settlements could be vacated by early next week, and the demolition of settler homes could begin a few days later. The Israeli Defense Forces said Wednesday, and it goes on. They demolished every house. They
did not demolish every single house when they left. There was still a large amount of.
Yes, they did. That was their policy. Show me something, that says that any settlement houses.
I'd be happy to.
They demolished every vacant settler home. I mean, that was their policy.
I'd be happy to. Give me just one moment, okay?
Yeah, here's an article I have from mfa.gov.israel about the settlement, or about the demolition of Gaza settlement homes.
I'm going to try to get in contact right now with my friend who lives in Gush Katir. And then I'll also try to
Haaretz.
Haaretz
Israeli government.
Haaretz has its moments, to say the least. But
I can understand why you would think that. I'm sure you're not a fan of Gideon Levy or what's her name, who lives in the West Bank. I'm sure you have your issues with some of their quote unquote left leaning writers. I mean, Haaretz has a pretty wide spectrum of writers, from left to right spectrum on their website. It's just they're not like J-Post and Ynet News, where it's only, right-wing perspective.
Right.
Haaretz is more balanced.
Come on, man. I'm a lot more balanced after speaking with me for X amount of time. If you assume I'm an extreme right-wing, then obviously I wouldn't be here talking to you. If I was...
Yeah, no, I agree. You're more reasonable. 90% of the people I discuss the issue with, you're definitely right. Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm going through the disengagement movement real quick. Settlements, blah blah blah. Night small. Sorry, I'm just reading through the disengagement movement real quick.
Here's an article. Here's an article from the New York Times in July of 2005 about how the Israeli government was trying to make an agreement to hand some of the greenhouses in economic development. However, the Israeli settlers destroyed them all before they left.
July Sharon, closure of Gush Katif, making the area close the military zone. Only residents were selected. Sorry, we'll go through the shut down, open entrance by Israelis. Depends, guys. Filter national staff, halls, foundation, evacuation commands. Some of the major orders are halal, demand. 14,000 soldiers. Let's see, dragging and screaming, road, fires, boom.
Here's that New York Times article if you want to take a look at it.
Basically, so it says here, synagogues, the evacuated settlements were razed by demolition crews, with 2,530 homes being destroyed. All but 2 of the synagogues settlements were left intact. On August 28th, the IDF began dismantling Gush Katif's 48 Grave Cemetery.
Sorry, what are you reading?
It's the Israel Unilateral Disengagement Plan. It's pretty much the Israeli policy. You can.
But yeah, I don't.
You want me to send you a link, or?
Sure.
I love the secondary conversation going on in like the talk thread below us. Yeah. I'm still going through it myself.
Yeah. Brad thinks everything is a lie. Everything Brad disagrees with is a lie. I've tried to have a conversation with him before, and man, it's something else. I prefer talking to you, that's for sure.
On September 11th, the Israeli cabinet revised an earlier decision to destroy the synagogues. The Palestinian Authority protested Israel's decision, arguing that it would rather dismantle the synagogues. On September 11th, the ceremony was held at the last Israeli flag.
Well, synagogues is one. Synagogues is one thing.
In addition to the synagogue, all of the greenhouses in the settlements were left intact after the Economic Cooperation Foundation raised $14 million to buy the greenhouses for the Palestinian Authority. On September 20th, the IDF temporarily entered the northern Gaza Strip, constructing a buffer zone. Bedouin says...
Yeah, but listen, there's an article here...
I'm reading just...
There's an article here in New York that says Jerusalem, July 14th, 2005. About half the greenhouses in the Israeli settlements in Gaza have already been dismantled by their owners, who have given up waiting to see if the government was going to come up with extra payment as an inducement to leave them behind, say senior officials working on the coordination of the summer's Israeli pullout from Gaza. Under international pressure to save what is left for Palestine.
Okay, well, following
economic development, Israeli and international officials are working on a plan to pay settlers to hand over the remaining yada yada.
Yeah, no, there's resettlement. But, I mean, there was a large number, it was a policy of the Israeli government at the time to kick them out and destroy their homes so that they would leave. But all infrastructure left behind was also destroyed, so I don't think anyone's really a hero in this situation. Following Israel's withdrawal, Palestine...
No, I mean...
Enter
I mean, the point... Like, my point in bringing this up is just, you know, if they did this in Gaza, you know, and there's a pullout of settlers in, you know, a final solution to a hypothetical two-state solution, I mean, the likelihood of them doing this, I mean, there's a chance they're going to do the same thing. That was, you know, my point.
Well, no,
of bringing that up in the first place.
I agree with your point, and that's one of the biggest fears amongst Israelis. But the fact is, there were Jews that lived there. I mean, the point of removing them from that and making it what I would call an apartheid area where you have no Jews and only Palestinians. When you made that apartheid is when you made it radical, essentially. When you pulled Jews out of there was no constraints, and rockets started firing. And it does say here, by the way, that they're
it wasn't settler communities.
But
they pulled out the occupation. However, you know, I think it's very superfluous to say to say that the occupation ended because Israel, remained in control of all borders, except for the Rafah border, which, Israel's buddy, Mubarak, did whatever America told him to in terms of the Rafah border, which wasn't any better, than in terms of the closures in Israel. Actually, the openings of the border, the Israeli borders, were much more lax in compared to the Rafah borders. But I mean, when an occupying power has control over the land, air, and sea and all borders, I mean, that's still an occupation. And after Hamas was elected in 2006, they put really, really heavy restrictions on exports and in the air raids that were happening,
Right.
when Hamas was, launching rockets.